We got to talk about it.
We got to talk about it.
And shout out to us bucking the trend of the ephemeral times that we're in. I know we meant to do this interview earlier. There were a couple of logistical things that we had to push. We're still talking about the High and Rising, the De La Soul book that you authored that came out last year. I've been thinking a lot about this. There's sort of like two stories to talk about here because I want to talk to you about the writing of the book, but then there's this whole crazy chapter that sort of got the what is it when the book gets like put reissued onto paperback? Like this is the crazy chapter that's like being
Yeah.
added, the additional chapter here. So I mean, let's yeah, I mean, since I already sort of alluded to it, what was it like? But fuck. I mean, that's a sort of a kind of toothless question. What was it like? I imagine it must have been a bit disappointing that De La Soul reacted in the way that they did with that Instagram post. Tell me, walk me through that from your perspective, because I have a lot of feelings about it and I want to get into the conversation, but obviously I want to hear your perspective on it.
Oh, for sure, man. I know we got to go there. We got to talk about it. And I'm going to be super honest with you about everything. So, when that whole thing first happened, my initial thought was disappointment because it's always rappers that give me a hard time indirectly. And I can't say it's every rapper, but anytime I've had some sort of issue in covering something, in curating something, it's always the rappers who will show up 15 minutes late to the call or an hour late to the conversation and expect you to just pretty much sit there and genuflect simply because they're famous or
When
not
you say
famous.
rappers, you're distinguishing from artists of other genres.
Yeah, no, because I covered right. No, correct. It's rap. Like I never have issues with jazz musicians. I've never had issues with anyone who does any other sort of music because they always come from a place of respect. They always come from a place of appreciating your time and your energy. And I can't say it's 100% all the time, but very rarely, seldomly, if ever, have I had anybody in any other genre jump out at me like De La Soul did. So
Hmm.
when that thing first happened, if I'm being honest with you, like right when it happened, I was disappointed and I was like, man, I feel like I take a lot of bullets from this culture that I try to uphold. Like if they would have read the book, they would have seen that it was an act of love. It was an act of I don't know. I feel like I'm at this place in my life and my career now where I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. Okay. So I didn't have to write the book. I wanted to write the book because I felt that they needed to be respected and revered in the literary marketplace because you can read a million books on Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bruce Springsteen, the Beatles. Why not De La? So but anyway, I'm rambling, but I felt the way. But as soon as I felt the way, I realized indirectly that my name is super strong out here in the streets because I didn't have to say anything publicly. Quite literally, everybody, like my colleagues, fans of De La, people who I've never met, were jumping out there on my behalf in a real way. Like, was like, yo, you guys are really wrong for this. Marcus is not the dude that's trying to take from your legacy or take money out of your pocket or anything like that. So, um, that initial reaction was definitely one of disappointment, but then also just as quickly encouragement, seeing how all those years of good work that I've done over the years has been holding up and it held up in a real way. And quite frankly, I feel like De La found out the hard way that I'm just not some dude. And
Hmm.
that's what I was trying to tell them. That's what I was trying to tell Maceo behind the scenes. And I was disappointed in the fact that he and I had a conversation. We had a private conversation through DMs.
Post
And
their post, like after they released that statement or before.
nah, before.
So
It was before.
before we get into that, had you reached out or attempted to include the members of the group in the book as you were writing it?
I had been trying to reach De La for 4 years.
Hmm.
4 years. I have screenshots to prove it that I was sending email upon email. I was reaching out through through mutual friends, through people who we know, going back to April of 2020.
Hmm.
Before the Kendrick book came out, I was trying to get in contact with those people. They couldn't be bothered. They didn't respond to anything.
Hmm.
So that whole notion of like them acting like they were blindsided by the book was them being completely dishonest, because that's not the case at all. And what I was about to say is, like, I also saw, on Maceo's post when he was like, oh yeah, he told a friend of mine publicly, like, oh yeah, we had a conversation. Marcus and I had a conversation and it didn't go well. That's not true at all. We had a conversation privately and we ended on a good note. I put him in contact with the people who could have got them some bread or could have gotten their cosign or something. I don't know if he reached out to them, but to sit there and act like I didn't do what I was supposed to do, like I wasn't on the up and up, it was not true at all. And I didn't jump out there publicly, even though I was tempted to, but I didn't need to, because quite frankly, the work stood up. It stood up and it's still standing up, and they're judging a book by its cover.
Literally.
Quite literally.
Quite literally. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because we do sort of live in a space now where the concept of a book or a biography being unauthorized almost comes across or is interpreted as a pejorative term, right? I forget the author who dealt with this, but with the Mac Miller book
Oh,
that
Paul.
came out. Yeah.
Paul Cantor. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul Cantor, was facing again like legal, threats about his unauthorized book versus the one that the estate was publishing. And it does sort of speak to space, or it speaks to the idea that there is a bit of a illiteracy, no pun intended, about the idea that hey, a lot of these books that come out are not necessarily authorized by the artist. I think a lot of the best works that come out are not necessarily authorized by the artist because it's not to say that that instantly carries a connotation of this is going to be a filthy tell all. We're going to tell you all the
Right.
things that the artist doesn't want you to know. But, like, look, I think that probably the best rap film, like biopic film that has come out has probably been Straight Outta Compton. Like, if and I'm open to any other suggestions or ones that you want to throw in to the hat. I thought it was well done. It also was like very much a branded, Cube, Dre, and the other members of NWA manicuring all of the details. And as a result, yeah, guess what? If I was having a film made about me and I'm still alive, please don't put the worst moments of my life or the most embarrassing moments of my life up on the silver screen to then be, memorialized or solidified in history. I think that at times that can be dangerous. And again, I've read your book. There's no moments in there where there's no scandal. I don't think De La Soul is a group that even has scandal that you could attach to their name.
That was the thing. I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, that's
No, please.
exactly what I was trying to explain. That's what I told Mace, because I was like, I explained to him, I said, look, um, I just wanted to show love. As cliche as that sounds, the book is quite literally about my journey with your music and how how you guys made it cool to be weird left of center Black kids in the suburbs. I think that's great,
Hmm.
and that's pretty much all it is. And then he shot back and was like, well, the reason why there's no De La Soul book in the marketplace is because we haven't written it yet. And I told him, and again, screenshot to prove it, I told him, I said, I would love to read an authorized De La Soul book. Like, if you guys decide to write your own autobiography, that's amazing. That doesn't mean mine can't exist. And that's what I was like, look, it's a journalistic take. It's no different from, um, the whole, his whole thing was like, oh, you're profiting off of my likeness. And I'm like, well, let me explain how books work. I'm not profiting at all. Like, what are you talking profiting? I was like, it's no different from the New York Times writing an article and they license an image from Getty. So are you gonna attack the journalist who wrote the article about you?
Right.
Like, why are it's the same thing. They get a salary. So are they profiting off of your likeness? Just based on your definition.
Mm.
Is that what the writer is doing there? So I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing because also I've learned over the past few years that people get weirded out by the word book because, like you just alluded to, like people just think, oh, gossip tell all, people are telling my business. But this one is weird because even after I explained the focus and I said that, it's about look, it has some biography in it, and I talked to some folks, but it's about how you guys impacted culture. To still vilify love was just very baffling to me. And it's a thing that I try not to think about too much now, but their reaction was quite disappointing, but it also wasn't unexpected.
Right. Um, and it's interesting too because look, okay, look, let me say this. I can understand as anybody who's read your book or is familiar with the history of the group. This is a group that has consistently gotten the short end of the stick in terms of protecting and having ownership of their likeness, of their music, of so many things. So I can understand, although I would still disagree and side with you on the statement you just made. I can understand why these artists could be a bit cagey about this sort of thing based on the whole context of their story and their careers. But
Hmm.
when I, again, to echo your point, when I saw that De La Soul is publishing their own book, I'm like, this is amazing. I can't wait to get that book too. There's no world in which I'm going to be like, well, I could buy the Marcus, and I recognize there's a degree of privilege there. I can afford to buy two books, like
Hmm.
there, but like, there's no reason why your book existing would then prevent me from being interested or wanting to go read and purchase the De La book because it almost seems like two completely different things about the same subject.
It showed a lack of research on their part because, again, look, I'm not going to sit here. Anybody who knows me knows that I don't even like talking about myself like that. I don't see myself as this thing. If everybody else says it, I appreciate it and I receive it. But I'm never going to be like, yes, I'm Marcus, and you should get with me on this book. Like, but it also showed a lack of research because if they would have just hit Google and just looked me up, that it could have gone a different way. Like they could have used that as a way in to like market their merch or to market their reissues or whatever. Like I'm not just some guy, and that's what everybody was trying to tell him. I'm talking like there were some names that were trying to like broker a meeting between us, and they just didn't respond to anything. And then all of a sudden, when the love starts pouring in from WNYC and from all the people tagging him on IG talking about, yo, this book is tight at We Are De La Soul, whatever.
Mm,
Now all of a sudden it's a problem. It's like, but I've been trying to get at you guys for 4 years. Like,
yeah.
so don't act blindsided because you have all those emails. Like, because that's my thing. Like, if you saw all the love that you were getting, then you had to have seen all the communication from the past 4 years of me trying to get at you guys. Like, don't play victim now. But I also realized that that is part of their narrative. Like, rightfully, they were, when they jumped out there against Tommy Boy in 2019, they totally were in the right. Where it's like, yo, Tommy's offering them a deal that's like, where Tommy gets 90%. That's crazy.
Right.
So in that instance, they totally should have rallied the community against Tommy. Okay, fair. This isn't that. Like, I'm not out here looking to run down De La. And if they would have, I don't know who's on their team or whatever, but they should have looked at those streaming numbers around when the book came out.
Mm.
They should have noticed, like, why is there an uptick in streams or purchases or whatever around November 19th? That's interesting. But instead, they want to vilify the person that took 4 years out of his life to shout you out. I thought that was dirty.
Was there ever a point in the initial stages of you reaching out that you considered or thought about not moving forward with the project because they weren't responding back?
Uh, no, because I would try to separate art from artist. So I still appreciate De La, and I still play their music. I still play the music, even though definitely, like, if I'm being honest with you, I don't feel the same about it.
Of
When
course.
I play the records, it's like, okay, all right, I don't really have the same charge that I did before because of their response. But um, I don't know. I'm always trying to write about people who I feel like have been sort of underrated by time, and it's kind of difficult to say that De La Soul is underrated, but within the literary context, they totally are. So I wanted to still write about them because it also was still writing about myself. It was also writing about my family, my friends. It was writing about people like us.
Mhm.
I wrote the book for people like us, where it's like we remember when certain records came out, and I see the 3 Feet High and Rising cover in your background.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I wrote it for us, knowing that the community, at least the community that loved De La, needed something like that. Like we needed to be spoken to as well. So whenever, they didn't respond, I just decided to just write it myself and just write from my own perspective because I knew the history and I didn't want to give up on something that I knew that the marketplace needed.
Right.
And I'm also confident that, look, I mean, response being what it is, I feel like I hope rather. I hope that it's a book that still just kind of hangs around for years and years, like Kendrick has done so far.